High-Speed UK is an alternative high-speed rail network developed by professional railway engineers to address the shortcomings of HS2. On a like-for-like basis, HSUK trumps HS2 in every aspect. It costs less, it delivers more, and can be built quicker.
What route does HSUK propose?
We start at Euston like HS2 and we tunnel under Hampstead out to the M1 and follow the M1 all the way to Leicester with access to Birmingham via an upgrade of the existing line into Birmingham. We then carry on up to Sheffield where there's a triangular junction and we go west to Manchester and Liverpool and east to Leeds and then on up the east coast to Teesside, Tyneside and Scotland. And from Scotland, from the Edinburgh-Glasgow link, we can further access places like Inverness and Aberdeen, which HS2 can't by going to Glasgow.
What, in your view, are the major failings of HS2?
Well, basically, they don't meet their own objectives, which is, to quote, to create hugely enhanced capacity and connectivity between our major conurbations. All they're doing is building a high-speed line, segregated from the existing network between two places, and that will never deliver the network that the nation needs.
Why is your scheme better?
Oh, because it's focused on joining the network that we've got onto a high-speed line so that you can actually go on and off the high-speed line and speed up journeys to lots and lots of places, far more than HS2 will ever do.
You would agree then that there's a really fatal flaw in the logic behind this project and the Northern Powerhouse angle of it?
Yeah, the failure to plan the network as a whole and the failure to integrate any major investment that's been such as High Speed 2 is clearly a major weakness and potentially fatal flaw in the design and operation of that element of what will be an isolated track rather than part of a broader network.
There is no harm in a government in this period spending massive amounts of money on infrastructure projects which will deliver economic benefits. This will not deliver economic benefits. The case is absolutely flawed. It seems to be based on some theoretical assumptions that businessmen will be sitting on this train and creating wealth somehow or other. I mean, they can do that already on the West Coast main line, the East Coast main line. So the economic case for this is totally flawed.
Have you looked at the plans of the HSUK project, and if so, what do you think of them?
Yeah, no, I have looked at HSUK and looked quite closely at them. And what's really quite different about HSUK and their approach is it's looking to integrate with the existing infrastructure. And in terms of giving value for money for the investment, that's a fundamental difference in delivering quite a different sort of end result. I think the High Speed UK alternative looks at the connections between second and third cities on routes which make for greater sort of connectivity between the cities and the towns where people live and where people work. And fundamentally it allows much greater connection and much more use of existing capacity more effectively. So I think the High Speed UK proposal's giving a better overall value for money solution.
Mr Osborne, he wants to show the world at large we're a country that can carry out a big infrastructure project. But I would have thought you'd want to show how we can do it well and not badly, and it's a bad scheme.
All governments, and this one is no exception, get hooked on projects which they can't get off, like expansion of Heathrow Airport perhaps, or as we discovered in the Department of Transport, I believe there's a group of civil servants there, aided and abetted by some of the train freaks who write about this all the time, and they're obsessed by doing HS2. They've committed their lives to that and their civil service pensions to that, and it's difficult to get off it. It's difficult to admit there's a better proposal, we got it wrong, can we think again? So there's an inevitable kind of inertia in government of driving on with something which may not work, and that's been my experience of government over many years.
They've got this one chosen option, and so they've got to go with it. And they're not rail experts, and they don't get the opportunity of talking to us, High Speed UK, so they don't know. It's as easy as that.
HSUK is much greener. The scheme saves 600 million tonnes of CO2, essential for climate change commitments, and makes use of existing transport corridors such as the M1. Importantly, HSUK's route avoids the Chilterns area of outstanding natural beauty and other tranquil rural areas.
Is HSUK better for the environment than HS2?
Well, there's two answers to that question. First of all, because we follow existing transport corridors, most particularly the M1 going out of London, we can avoid the Chilterns and a huge amount of sensitive rural landscapes further north. The other answer relates really to our fundamentally better connectivity and capacity, and that allows us to generate the modal shift, which will then give us the CO2 reductions that we need to meet our national environmental targets.
It avoids wrecking the grounds of Walton Hall near Wakefield, which is the world's first nature reserve, and it saves much more CO2 emissions than HS2 will ever do so.
The route proposed for HS2 cuts through London, the Chilterns and rural Warwickshire and would cause decade-long disruption to Camden in its proposed expansion of Euston Station. HS2 needs more tunnelling than the Channel Tunnel just to get to Birmingham.
Let me put it this way. If 30 years ago we'd done as the French had done and decided to build a super duper TJV from Glasgow through the middle of Manchester, through the middle of Birmingham, right into central London with a super duper new station, say near Leicester Square or Oxford Street, and then linked it to the Channel Tunnel, I would demolish 1,000 homes for that. It would be a fantastic investment. But that time has passed. It's just a fantasy. This thing will end somewhere near Euston, demolish lots of homes and not even be linked into the Eurostar train as far as I understand.
Colin, I'd now like to turn to the issues affecting Camden. Can you understand why the residents are so upset by the forthcoming disruption?
Very much. They're facing around 20 years of disruption to their entire community, and large swathes are going to be destroyed by the expansion of Euston to the west. HS2's disruption is programmed to last about 20 years if you take into account Network Rail rebuilding their half of the station as well, which is a logical follow-on from HS2's programme.
Well, HS2 offers nothing to Camden. Well, the area north of the station is primarily a residential area on both sides of the station, and it affects a lot of people. I think HS2's own figures are that within 300 metres there's just nearly 17,000 people will be affected by it. Well, we were originally told it would be all completed by 2026, but since September last year they brought in this phase proposal which makes it much, much longer. The first two phases until 2033, and then the third phase, which is the reconstruction of the classic part of the station, we have no idea. We have no idea.
How sympathetic have government been to your plight?
Not sympathetic at all, nothing. I think they've decided there's this phrase, you can't build a railway or a big infrastructure project without breaking eggs, and they just decided we're the losers and we've got to put up with it.
What I think we have to be asking very, very firmly to the government is why they've come along with such a cack-handed scheme to expand a station when there was such an easy strategy to actually allow it to be reconstructed without any of the disruption and permanent destruction that's going to be involved in Euston's programme. The government hasn't given any answers, neither has HS2 Limited, and we're faced with something that's going to be a complete discredit to railway engineering. It could and should be done so much better.
And your scheme, would it affect Camden so badly?
We would pretty much avoid all of the permanent disruption and most of the temporary also. We have a plan to divert all the commuter services out of Euston onto Crossrail, and this will allow Euston to be reconstructed in a very simple ordered process which can be accomplished much more quickly, and at the same time our scheme, because we've diverted the services, there's actually no need in the permanent sense ever to expand Euston.
Now, there is an alternative to HS2 which is known as HSUK. Why do you think that's the better alternative?
Well, in our immediate area, in this part of London, it's far less disruptive because it will stay within the footprint of the station, existing station and the railway. But, you know, I'm absolutely convinced it's a much better scheme countrywide. It's much simpler, it has a kind of elegance about it, which HS2 is just really to us a kind of bodged scheme, and it's cheaper and it connects more people. So we're very happy to support it.
Why do you think HS2 feels it has to cut a path through the Chilterns?
Well, I think they're following the remit. They were asked to build a station at Old Oak Common, they were asked to go to Birmingham, and they were just built the straightest possible line between the two. That takes them inevitably through the Chilterns.
Does HS2 benefit the so-called Northern Powerhouse?
I think it actually makes the Northern Powerhouse hugely difficult to achieve. HS2 was only designed as a north-south railway, and that's influenced all its routings around Leeds, Sheffield and Manchester, and it's dictated also terminus stations in both Manchester and Leeds. And those terminus stations make the achievement of good quality Transpennine links, which is the fundamental purpose of HS3, almost impossible to achieve.
What is HSUK's route across the Pennines?
Indeed, the line from London arrives at Sheffield Victoria and continues towards Penistone, where there is a triangle, a big triangular junction, which goes northwards to Leeds, westwards through the Pennine tunnels, the Woodhead Tunnel, to Manchester and on to Liverpool. And the north side of the triangle is what links Liverpool, Manchester, Leeds, Hull, Newcastle together.
Well, can you tell me how many more cities in the north will be connected to a high-speed rail network under HSUK's plans?
High Speed UK, we've counted this, we'll get to about 20 major northern cities. On the same basis of counting, HS2 will get to 9, and they'll effectively only link these places to London, not to each other.
There are some very big problems though to do with integrating the Northern Powerhouse aspirations with the high speed or the high speed network.
Could you amplify on that?
Well, I think as soon as you make a big investment as being proposed for the high speed 2 network, then you are you're cutting out options, preventing other alternatives being developed further. And without thinking very carefully about how the high-speed network and the normal network integrate, you'll fail to get the best value for money out of the investment.
There seems to be pretty widespread support in the north for the project. Do you think they're understanding the whole picture?
No, clearly not. I mean, there's some very big problems, I think, in the north in terms of how the high-speed network and the priorities that come with that are actually being put forward. Certainly running a business in the north of England, I'm very conscious that we cannot get from east to west very well, and that actually integrating with existing networks is very, very important. If we want to increase the capacity and connectivity between the northeast and the northwest, then we need to think very carefully about how the lines from the south join that network, in particular the proposals that are currently being discussed for High Speed 2.
There have been all sorts of promises made from Westminster about deliverability of the whole project. What are your views on these promises?
It's very important that these projects are delivered. The concern I have is that these are very long-term projects which will see out many of these parliaments over the next 5, 10, 15 years. So what we need to do is make sure we've got the strategy in place which can be endorsed politically by all parties, which gives the solutions locally and nationally that we're looking for. And part of that is making sure that the promise of a Northern Powerhouse is supported by the strategy that we put in place today. And I think if we want to get and deliver on what's being discussed now as this idea of a Northern Powerhouse connecting the east and west coasts and the industrial heartland, then we need to configure the network in Sheffield and in Leeds and through the Pennines in such a way which actually supports that and makes that deliverable, makes that much more possible and thinks of things as a wider, more integrated network.
And do you feel that those of you in the north with such expertise are being consulted fully on this?
It feels, with certain of the proposals that are being tabled at the moment, that it's being dictated to us from a big tower in Canary Wharf. And I'm not sure that that's really buying the hearts and souls of the people in the north of England.
What cities will be at an economic disadvantage if HS2 comes to fruition?
pretty much every northern city, because the problem is that HS2 in its current configuration was going to suck economic activity, suck jobs down to London, and it will leave the northern cities poorer for that. Obviously, the places that are connected to HS2 will probably do better than the places that aren't. So places like Bradford, we think, are going to suffer greatly.
What is best for Scotland, HS2 or HSUK?
Well, we think HS2 is just giving up on Scotland. They're trying to make a difficult route up the west side of the country work. This route is only going to serve Edinburgh and Glasgow and provide links from London. What we want to see in High Speed UK is Scotland, the major cities of Edinburgh and Glasgow, directly linked to nearly every single principal English city. We want to see links further north into Scotland to Aberdeen, Perth and Inverness and Dundee. We just think Scotland's being shortchanged by HS2 at present.
I think we should be looking to use the railway network and other transport networks to fully integrate and to increase the connection between Scotland and England. And I think a high-speed UK solution looks to deliver that much more effectively than any proposals that are currently on the table for high speed too. There's a very interesting and very powerful political statement behind transport networks, and they do need to be thought through much more thoroughly rather than just looking at single line solutions between point A and point B.
HSUK has far superior connectivity to HS2. It makes 94% of journeys between cities faster compared to just 13% for existing HS2 plans. HSUK also allows high-speed services to extend onto the existing network and links to Heathrow and HS1, whilst directly connecting all major UK cities. HSUK would improve regional rail access across the UK and integrate with existing rail services, claims that HS2 cannot live up to.
The detractors of HS2 take a view that business will not flow to the north. In fact, the reverse will happen. It will flow from the north to London, which is already overheated. Do you subscribe to that?
Very much so. I think there's a very significant risk without better connection and capacity across the north of England that any investment that you make in a line from the south to the north will draw business and industry and the young intellects and intelligence that exist in the universities and towns like in Newcastle and Sheffield and in Leeds get drawn into London, because that's where the work is, that's where the real sort of investment in opportunities are.
We feel that the design of the HS2 system, which is not a network, will merely funnel people to London. It does not have connectivity between the various northern cities, and that is why London is likely to benefit over the northern cities.
Which scheme has the best connection for our primary cities?
Well, High Speed UK, unquestionably. Our fundamental aim was to interlink all of these major cities. We've actually managed to increase the number of cities interlinked from 10 to 20, and HS2 just doesn't come close. They were only ever rumoured to build a high-speed line between a few specific places, and they've failed to look at the rest of the country.
How will HSUK generate economic benefits for the north?
In general terms, HSUK connects everything, every city and every major conurbation to each other, all of them connected, and at the same time generates significant journey time reduction between them, and that will promote the wish to travel by rail, modal shift and environmental benefit.
How will HSUK improve the northern cities' access to international markets at both Heathrow and Manchester?
Well, we intend to have direct services, so it's from the 9 northern cities down to Heathrow, and of course far better connections to Manchester than there are now. That's part of the Northern Powerhouse specification, and the design includes the westward extension of Manchester Airport Station, because at the moment it's a terminus and you can't go to the west, so Liverpool will be able to access it and so on.
HS2 Limited has designed the fastest railway in the world, but it won't give the UK the network it needs. No one at HS2 Limited understands the real problem: to develop a better connected UK rail network that will improve all journeys. This is what High Speed UK is doing. Its timetable, based on detailed design of nearly 1,000 kilometres of new railway, shows how 21 principal cities can be linked with direct high-speed services operating at hourly or better frequencies. HSUK's timetable also shows average intercity journey times almost halved. HS2 cannot get close to this performance.
This is where we basically hugely outscore HS2. We go slower as an absolute maximum speed, but because we improve so many more journeys, we can claim a 45% average journey time reduction across the entire UK network. HS2 cannot come close to this.
What would the cost savings be if HSUK was adopted as opposed to HS2?
Well, we've done comparative cost estimates which show on a like-for-like basis HSUK to be about £20 billion cheaper to build than HS2. That's linking London to the major cities of the Midlands and the North.
Let me tell you, I've been using the West Coast Main Line for 35 years. I'm devoted to it. It's done wonderfully well under Branson. In 1995, the government looked at upgrading it. Not a whole new line, nothing fancy, better signalling, bit of extra track, I think, round Stoke-on-Trent. It was budgeted at 2,000 million. When it was finally completed a few years ago, it was 12,000 million. And the National Audit Office say they can't find where 2 billion went, it just disappeared. Expenditure on new train lines is always grossly underestimated by the Department of Transport. They lie about the cost. Let's look at the line to Bristol in the southwest. We're supposed to be just electrifying that. The government have had to halt it because the costs have gone way, way over budget. And they're doing nothing except electrifying the existing line. This line will never be built for 50 billion. Once it gets to about 75 billion cost, the government will hopefully pull the plug, but not before we've spent too much money and demolished half of Camden.
But we know that, you know, some of the finest transport brains in the country have looked at HS2, and there appears to be an overwhelming support for it by politicians. Why do you think they've reached these conclusions?
I think people are very clear that there's a need for an improvement, a strategic improvement to the national rail network, and they see High Speed 2 as probably being the only sensible, only known game in town, and certainly the only one where there's been very significant investment supported by various parties so far. Whether that's giving the best solution, I think is a question that's still waiting to be answered, and certainly as soon as it gets down to the local level, the problems with the layout and configuration of High Speed 2 become more and more apparent.
Why do you think the government are ignoring the HSUK plans?
I'm not sure why. It sort of puzzles me because I believe the drivers behind High Speed 2 seem to be much more about some form of a grand projet, a big signature project onto which individuals can tag their name, not looking at the wider benefit to society and to industry, and looking at doing one, you know, point-to-point sort of city-to-city sort of network or route as being proposed for High Speed 2 gives them a job and finish, and they can. It's not as complicated in terms of integrating it with existing networks.
The existing lines to many more places. That HS2 doesn't really serve places, it's just a fast service. Stations are mostly outside cities, it hardly stops at all. It just hasn't been, nobody's thought it through properly, and already people are realising it's doing nothing for connectivity in the north and then in the Midlands.
It's a development that's 30 years too late. Sorry, 50 years too late by the time it's built. It will never be built in time, it will never be built to budget, and people will not be using it. There's no need for it.
This is a once-in-a-century opportunity to rebalance the economy, improve the environment, and give Britain the railway system it deserves. It is not too late for the government to pause the HS2 bill, rethink the UK high-speed rail initiative and replace HS2 with something much better that will be cheaper, better connected and quicker to implement. HSUK.